Though I'm not following the suggested unravelled reading or visual prompt for this reflection, because I had my idea for this Sunday fully formed before the Unravelling series was selected, using the lectionary reading. By happy accident and a bit of sideways manoeuvring, I hope, you'll find that my thoughts weave in and out of the general theme of our summer unravelling reflections. I'd like to start with a riddle. I heard this probably 60 plus years ago, so the majority of you, don't be offended, will have heard it and remember it too. I've had to amend it ever so slightly for more politically correct times. It goes like this. A big Inuit and a little Inuit were standing in the snow. The little Inuit is the big Inuit's son. But the big Inuit is not the little Inuit's father. Who is the big Inuit? Before you all shout out the answer, I thought I would try an experiment. I would try it on my granddaughters, Sophia and Eliza. At 10 and 7, they are both fully paid up members of the sisterhood, even though they were both initially stumped. Help them. Who was the big Inuit? The mother, thank you. I knew somebody would know. Of course, it's obvious when you think about it, his mother. But we're still, sometimes, even today, so conditioned to patriarchal society, a male-dominated way of thinking, that we can find ourselves caught out. Think of the language of the Bible, of prayers. We've just spoken the words, Our Father. Although there are aspects of God, as our hymns are telling us today, that might best be described as motherly. Our Mother. Hymn 174 in the Christian Science hymnal starts like this. Like as a mother, God comforteth his children. Comfort is calm that bids all tumult cease. More on that later. Our short reading today is such a familiar one, entitled Jesus Visits Martha and Mary. It describes a conversation between Martha and Jesus. The hymn we've just sung develops the narrative further. In it, Mary sits at Jesus' feet, listening to his teaching. Martha is frantically preparing food, rushing around in practical service, while her sister sits and listens. Martha complains to Jesus, Lord, don't you care my sister has left me to do all the work myself? Tell her to come and help me. Jesus does no such thing. Instead, he commends the passive sister Mary, listening at his feet. Mary made the better choice, as the hymn puts it. If you were to look, as I have, at a sermon suggestion sheet for this passage, you'll be invited to develop a reflection along the lines of exploring whether we are Marthas or Marys. Am I? Are you someone who rushes around busily from dawn to dusk, task after task after task? Or do we make space to listen? The conclusion, as the hymn suggests, is that we should aim for a blend of both. Help me find a way to be a perfect blend of Mary's heart and Martha's hands, contemplation and action, a perfect blend of both. If I were a tired reflector or preacher this morning, it would be tempting to say at this point, right, that's your lot, sermon over, on to the next hymn. But I suspect you think that you want more than that. I've been reading a recently published book in preparation for this service, and it is this: Women Remembered, Jesus' Female Disciples, co-authored by Helen Bond, Professor of Christian Origins and Head of the School of Divinity at the University of Edinburgh, and Joan Taylor, Professor of Christian Origins and Second Temple Judaism at King's College London. They write, resetting our picture of early Christian women transforms our overall portrait of the early church. But the impact of Christian imagery doesn't stop at church doors. Changing our images from the past isn't just about justice or forgotten women of the first century, but for women's place throughout history. And as we'll see, women were at the table from the very beginning. It might come as a surprise to those familiar with the Martha Mary passage that Lynn read to realize that food and cooking aren't actually mentioned. In Greek, Martha is distracted with much serving. The important word is diakono, related to the word deacon. Elsewhere in Luke, diakono refers to the public roles of mission and proclamation, as well as practical service. So why not here write Taylor and Bond? That places the story in a new light. Rather than a dispute about household chores, the quarrel is now about Christian ministry in all its forms. Jesus was saying, in effect, listen first, serve later, not listen only, don't serve. In other New Testament books, though, there are passages that clearly try to limit women's roles. 1 Timothy 2:12, the author maintains, I permit no woman to teach or have authority over a man. She's to keep silent. Our own Church of Scotland, until relatively recently, doesn't have an unblemished record here. I can still remember all male Kirk sessions. Somewhere deep in the Western Isles, that may still be the case. I tried to research that on the internet. The Church of Scotland is silent at this point. And of course, at that point, there were no women ministers. I've spoken before about my former church, St. Mary's, King Street, where I was ordained an elder by the Reverend Michael S.M. Crawford in 1985. Here is the exterior, a slab-like tower with sanctuary and halls attached. Worship began here just before the outbreak of war in 1939. And the interior, a small point in passing, I was asked to design the pulpit fall you see here by the Kirk session, one of only two overtly religious pieces of art I've produced. The other was a crucifix commission for the Roman Catholic Chaplaincy Centre in the Spittal, only 500 yards from St. Mary's. St. Mary's is the reason I was privileged to meet the first two women ministers of the Church of Scotland. Elizabeth Kinneborough, licensed in 1969, and Catherine McConaughey, ordained a few months later. Catherine served as assistant minister at St. George's Tillydrone in Aberdeen. In retirement, the Reverend Catherine McConaughey was a member of St. Mary's. When I met her as an old woman, I didn't at first realize her significance within the history of the Kirk. I struggled initially to find a photograph of her. That premier newspaper of the Northeast, the Press and Journal, came to my rescue. Here in the centre is the Reverend Catherine McConaughey in 1970, in full ministerial robes and, if you look carefully, a rather nifty black ecclesiastical hat at the cutting of the first turf for the new St. George's Church, Tillydrone, Aberdeen's first triangular church, as the P&J proudly proclaimed. And Elizabeth Kinneborough, initially qualified as a teacher, MA Edinburgh and DipEd Murray House, Betty, as she preferred to be called, later gave up teaching and studied for a Bachelor of Divinity degree at New College, Edinburgh, the only woman in her class. This was followed by postgrad research at Cambridge. She then returned to Scotland to join the staff at the University of St Andrews. There, she was one of the Reverend Mike Crawford's tutors, so you can see the circular connection. In 1979, she was called to the parish of Birse in Aberdeenshire, later to be linked with Fingen and Strawn. St Mary's was famous for church hill walks, and it was at the conclusion of one of those that Caroline, Andrew, Matthew and I met her. She threw open the manse gardens at Birse for a post-walk barbecue for some 30 of us. There we are, tucking into burgers. We, the boys and Caroline and I, long remembered the delicious selection of chutneys and pickles that she provided. Two pioneering women who heard the call and responded. It seems incredible that only 52 years ago there were no women ministers in the Church of Scotland. Although I said at the start I was not following the visual prompts in the Unravelled series, this is not completely true. I've always been drawn to the image of the blue knitting in the foyer, slipped from its needles, unravelling before our eyes. That gave me an idea. I would knit the final part of my reflection. You didn't know that I could knit. Well, it's been 65 years since last I did, but like riding a bike, you never forget. I'm not good enough to knit a jumper for the next Christmas fair, but it will serve to illustrate a point this morning. For the next stage, I need, Colin's up and away. I need a willing volunteer. Now, as they say in all the best tricks, we've never met before, have we? No. Colin, come and stand up here. Now, I'd like you to hold the knitting needle in one hand, nice and high, so that everyone can see. Now, slip, I hope I haven't had the tension too tight, slip the stitches off the needle and begin to unravel the knitting. Not too far, a little more, keep going. This is good fun. Isn't it? Yes, yes. I always thought we could be a great double act, you know. Like, that's enough. Thank you very much. Now, And I need the knitting needle back as well, just in case I knit that jumper. How did that make me feel? Having my knitting destroyed before my eyes. Not too upset, just a bit of light visual relief to make a point. But what if that unraveled knitting represented the plight of women and girls in Afghanistan, denied education beyond primary level, forced to be veiled at all times, having to adapt once more to the strictures of the Taliban, no political rights, no career prospects, no freedom? What if that unraveled knitting represented the destruction of lives, girls and boys in war-torn Ukraine? What if that unraveled knitting represented the scrapping of the 1973 Roe versus Wade ruling in America, the Supreme Court's regressive, dangerous, and insulting decision to abolish a woman's constitutional right to abortion? As one demonstrating woman's poster put it, "One day may I have the same rights as a gun." That same American Supreme Court may in the future have its eyes on outlawing same-sex marriage and LGBTQ plus rights, unraveling, unraveling, unraveling. A New Testament reading about Jesus and two women. A book that deals with the importance of Jesus' female disciples and the equal place they had within the early church. The pioneering ministries of two women in Scotland in the 70s, reclaiming the place of women in the ministry of word and sacrament. A piece of unraveled knitting, and all that it represents. That's been the story of our reflection today. Like as a mother, God comforteth his children. Comfort is calm that bids all tumult cease. Comfort is hope and courage for endeavour. Comfort is love, whose home abides in peace. Hope, courage, love, peace with justice, and a God knitting and weaving those throughout the ages. Amen.